They destroyed everything. Let me tell you, there's no real way to prepare for coming home, and finding out your family's history got flattened in the space of a Tuesday afternoon, especially not when the so-called queen of your HOA is standing there, clipboard in hand, acting like she's just handed out winning lottery tickets. But that's what I saw. Brittany, white blazer crisp as a hospital sheet, hair perfect, looking over the splinters of what used to be my grandfather's hunting cabin like she'd just won a prize. "That's what happens when you refuse to pay your fees," she said to the neighbors watching from their driveways, handing me a demolition bill for 20 grand like it was a pizza receipt. You ever see someone make the worst mistake of their life and not even realize it? That was Brittany Turner, right then, right there. Now, you know that moment when everything just stops? When you're driving home thinking about leftovers and whether you left the porch light on, and then you pull into your driveway, and there's just nothing where everything should be. That was me, 6:15 Tuesday night, sitting in my car and staring at the empty patch of dirt behind my house. Not damaged, not burned, just gone. The cabin had been standing that very morning when I left for work. 43 years of birthdays, fishing trips, and bad jokes about Grandpa's snoring, gone. I sat there, hands shaking, not even sure who to call first: police, insurance, maybe my sister Linda, or hell, a therapist. But then I saw her, Brittany Turner, standing in the middle of the ruins, clipboard raised like she was conducting an orchestra. She gave me that smile, the kind that makes you want to throw something. "Jim," she called out, waving that scepter like she was the kingmaker. "I was hoping to catch you before you saw this. I know it must be quite a shock." Her fake concern was so thick it made my skin crawl. She launched into this speech about community safety and structural hazards, handed me a city inspector's order with a name I'd never heard, Michael Davis, and told me demolition cost 12 grand, plus 8 grand in fines, all due in 30 days or my property would be up for foreclosure. All I could think was, 20 grand for what? For destroying the place where my granddad taught me to fish, where I planned to propose to Linda next month. Yeah, that's the favor she was doing me. I barely got out. 20,000 for what violations exactly? Before she started rattling off every petty infraction in the HOA handbook: unauthorized structure modifications, fence height, improper landscaping. I said, "These are all fabricated." And for the first time, her smile cracked. "Most people around here just cave, retired folks, young families, people who can't afford to fight the HOA. But I'm not most people." I pulled out my phone, took pictures of the document, the mess, and Brittany herself as she started to realize I wasn't just going to roll over. Then I called the county sheriff, right in front of her. She just smirked, said I'd find everything was handled properly. The deputy came, took photos, filed a report, but I could tell this wasn't going anywhere unless I could prove fraud. As far as law enforcement was concerned, this was a civil fight between a homeowner and an HOA, unless I had proof of something criminal. Linda's flight wouldn't land until morning. I had the whole night to figure out how someone could destroy 43 years of family memories and make it look official. So I sat down with Brittany's paperwork, using skills I'd honed in federal court for 15 years. The signature on the demolition order looked rushed, the letterhead was crooked, and most suspicious of all, there was no Michael Davis anywhere in the county directory. I called every department: building permits, code enforcement, fire safety, nothing. No one by that name, period. I called Linda and put her on speaker, pacing in what used to be my backyard. "They destroyed Grandpa's cabin," I said. She took a breath, told me not to sign anything or pay anything till she got back. I stood there in the dark, phone flashlight shaking in my hand, staring at a piece of paper that felt like the key to the whole thing. Here's where being a judge pays off. I know when something stinks, and this stank worse than a fish market in July. If the inspector wasn't real, then the demolition order was fake. If the order was fake, then Brittany Turner had just committed a felony, and she was about to find out what happens when you pick the wrong guy to mess with. Next morning, I was at the courthouse before 9. The county clerk, Margaret, a legend who's been running property records since the 80s, looked at Brittany's paperwork and said, "This is highly irregular. Emergency demolitions require public notice and multiple approvals, and my file had none of it. Your cabin was built in 1974, Margaret said, 15 years before the HOA even existed. That makes it a grandfathered structure, permanently protected." She pulled up the permits, showed me everything. Not only did the HOA have zero authority, but destroying a protected structure was a felony. Margaret started pulling out more files. Turner Properties LLC had bought up a dozen homes in the past 2 years, always from people with sudden, sketchy HOA violations, and always sold to Megadev Corporation at a profit. My property was the last piece for a $15 million luxury development deal. Turns out Brittany had done her homework. She'd studied my salary, my job title, even my family situation. On paper, I was the perfect target, low-level government worker, not much money, not the type to fight back. I snapped photos of every document, built a file thick enough to make any prosecutor drool. The most damning thing? All the contractor permits bore that same Michael Davis signature. Linda showed up with her laptop, dove into state law, and found the nail in Brittany's coffin. Grandfathered structures are untouchable, and targeting based on vulnerability could even be a federal civil rights violation. Brittany's been running this scam for years, she said. Elderly, young families, folks like me, anyone she thought would just fold. We laid out every bit of evidence on our dining table. This is bigger than your cabin, Linda said. This is a criminal conspiracy. The FBI is going to want to look. That night, I sat outside, holding my granddad's old fishing license, thinking about how he'd done everything by the book. 63 years, never once fished without the proper documentation. It wasn't just about the cabin. It was about everything she'd tried to destroy: integrity, respect for the rules, the idea that if you do things right, you shouldn't be bulldozed by someone with a clipboard in a power complex. Next morning, an anonymous envelope appeared under my door. Brittany's own notes, outlining her entire plan: research, target, fabricate documents, destroy property, squeeze families for money. Phase 4. Permanent elimination of property ownership. Linda looked at me. She's not just greedy. She's dangerous. At the emergency HOA meeting that night, the community center was packed. Brittany strutted up, PowerPoint blazing, describing her emergency actions as community protection. But she made a fatal mistake. She started talking about engineering specifics and legal authority. I stood up. Mrs. Turner, can you show us the legal authority that allows you to demolish grandfathered structures? The room fell silent. She blustered, tried to pivot, but couldn't answer. I pulled out my phone, showed the property record, and neighbors started murmuring. Then Tom Miller, neighbor and newly minted hero, stood up with a manila folder. Years of HOA targeting, every victim, every profit. The room exploded, neighbors comparing notes, realizing they'd all been picked off one by one. Brittany, desperate, started shouting about confidential HOA matters. But it was over. People were connecting the dots, and nobody was buying her story anymore. Then she made the fatal play, filed a complaint with the federal government, trying to get me fired, not realizing she was reporting a federal judge to himself. Meanwhile, Linda assembled a federal case file that would put Brittany away for a decade. I met with a reporter who'd been called in by Brittany herself, thinking she could spin the story. Instead, she gave me a bullhorn to the entire city. Anonymous sources kept dropping evidence, development timelines, targeting notes, you name it. Brittany was desperate. The more she panicked, the more mistakes she made. Friday night, Brittany hosted a community leadership seminar on live stream, complete with professional video setup, thinking she was teaching the world how to handle entitled government employees. She even bragged about her techniques in real time, not realizing the guy asking tough questions in chat was me, under an alias. What if your research missed something about their actual position? I typed, Brittany, that's impossible. They're all the same, underpaid, overworked, desperate to avoid conflict. That was my cue. I stood up, walked to the front, pulled out my federal judge credentials, and introduced myself to Brittany, the crowd, and 400 people on the live stream. The room went dead silent. Brittany's face cycled from confusion to horror as she realized she'd just confessed to multiple federal crimes, on camera, in front of witnesses and law enforcement. The chat exploded, phones buzzed, and within hours her so-called masterclass had gone viral. By the next morning, clips were everywhere. Legal forums, late-night TV, memes. The FBI called. Her live stream was the missing piece in a multi-state fraud investigation. Everything Brittany had built crumbled. Turner Properties filed for bankruptcy. Megadev pulled out. the whole thing collapsed. Even her former supporters apologized, neighbors brought over food, and for the first time in years, people started talking about how to make our HOA actually serve the community. A few months later, I sat in court, on the other side of the bench for once, as Brittany was sentenced for wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. Victims from 4 states testified. Her defense tried to argue entrapment, but the judge wasn't having it. Brittany got 5 years in prison, 3 more on probation, and had to pay almost $2 million in restitution. She was banned for life from any position of community trust. We used part of the restitution money to start a legal defense fund for families being bullied by HOAs, the Grandfather's Compass Foundation. Our rebuilt cabin became a symbol of what happens when neighbors stick together and when bullies finally get what's coming. Law schools started using Brittany's live stream as a case study in what not to do. Even in prison, she was still teaching, just not the lesson she intended. Sometimes, justice really is as perfect as you hope. And sometimes, the people who think they hold all the cards end up live streaming their own downfall. So, what would you have done in my shoes? Ever seen someone pick the worst possible target for their little power games? Let's hear your stories, because trust me, nothing is more satisfying than watching karma do its work, live, and in color.